8-bit joystick. Do you remember the feeling of waking up on a Saturday, pouring a bowl of a cereal so sugary it would probably be illegal today, and planting yourself right in front of the TV for hours of cartoon bliss? That was a special time, and for a whole generation, it was a cultural ritual. But what if I told you this golden age of Saturday morning cartoons wasn't just a happy accident? Which brings me to an experiment. Here in 2025, can I actually bottle that lightning? Can I recreate the authentic experience of watching Saturday morning cartoons? I think I can, but it's not just about the shows. It was the ritual, the anticipation, and yeah, even the commercials. This all leads to my central question. Does the entire experience of Saturday morning, the schedule, the ads, the ritual, actually make the shows better? And can I actually recreate that feeling in 2025? Or is this just an exercise in nostalgia-fueled insanity? In the 1980s, the Reagan administration deregulated TV programming and advertising rules aimed at children. The rules that once limited how much companies could sell to kids were drastically loosened. The result? An explosion of cartoons that were often 22-minute commercials designed to sell toys. It created a Saturday morning cartoon marketing block that was ironically burrowed deep into our minds and created a nostalgic dopamine hit that we're still chasing today. We live in an age of near unlimited entertainment, but back then, you just had a handful of channels and that was it. That scarcity made the shows that targeted us feel incredibly special. You had two main windows to catch them. The legendary Saturday morning cartoon block, which ran from about 8 o'clock in the morning to 11-ish, and then the after school block, a precious 2 hours before the 5 o'clock news came on. So I'm setting out to rebuild that experience, and to do it right, I need the right gear. Nothing says Saturday morning cartoons like the warm glow of the cathode ray tube CRT TV. I've got my 9-inch Toshiba with a DVD player, the 14-inch combo with a DVD player and VCR, my JVC D-Series Behemoth. But the one that's easiest to get to from my couch in my living room is my 19-inch Panasonic TV. Now, getting Blu-rays and YouTube to play nice with the CRT TV can be a little difficult, and for that, I'm bringing in a secret weapon. That's right, the PlayStation 3. I've been meaning to make a whole video on why the PlayStation 3 is the ultimate upgrade for your CRT TV. But for now, its mission is simple. Serve up my cartoons and vintage ads. With the setup complete, I've established some ground rules for myself to make the project as authentic as possible. The rules. One and done. I will watch one episode of each show per sitting. No binging. Part of the experience was waiting a whole week to find out what happens next. Mandatory commercials. When the show hits an intended commercial break, I will pause the episode and switch to a pre-selected YouTube playlist to watch 2 vintage commercials from the era. A real break was longer, but this captures the spirit. The morning ritual. I will have to watch these cartoons first thing in the morning. I will grant myself permission for bathroom breaks and, crucially, coffee. No distractions. I'm going to try and stay away from my laptop, the internet, and my cell phone for the simulated Saturday morning cartoons. So to test this, I've curated a lineup of shows on DVD and Blu-ray that captured the spirit of the era, including one that represents a what-if scenario. Speed Racer, one of the very first anime series to become a hit in the US. While it's from the 1960s, its fast-paced dialogue, action, and a 1990s revival on MTV made it a cult classic for my generation. Dungeons & Dragons, a genuinely excellent cartoon that took the fantasy of the popular role-playing game and made it into a compelling adventure. It is a perfect time capsule of 1980s fantasy. Mighty Orbots, a co-production between American and Japanese studios to cash in on the transforming robot craze. It was visually impressive, but it got caught up in a heated trademark lawsuit and it disappeared just after 13 episodes. Star Wars Droids. Star Wars was popular, but George Lucas didn't feel like making any more movies after Return of the Jedi. Lucasfilm signed off on some questionable animated series. Their place in the official Star Wars canon is debatable, but they aired on American TV on Saturday mornings, so they're canon for this project. And my What If show, Mobile Suit Gundam 0079. This series was a watershed moment, creating the real robot genre with its gritty and epic story, but it was wrapped in a bright and colorful kids show package that was literally designed to sell plastic toys. It was a rating failure for its first run and it was canceled early, but a passionate fan base and model kit sales turned it into a 45-year-strong franchise that it is today. I've heard Mobile Suit Gundam described as the most epic Saturday morning cartoon that never was. So that's the plan. I'll be having a bowl of sugary cereal, a cup of coffee because I'm an adult, allegedly, and maybe even a root beer to make it truly decadent. So for my first Saturday morning cartoon session, I got up, got out of bed, made my coffee, fed my cat, and then sat down for some cartoon time. However, being an adult cell phone addict in the modern world, the first thing that I did after waking up was check my phone. And I looked at the day's events and the news and I got stressed out about them. And then I saw that a friend wanted to meet for lunch and I was worried about how much Saturday morning cartoon time I could actually cram in before I had to get ready to go. And maybe that's all that we're missing. Those carefree days without responsibilities where people weren't messaging you all the time. So, did we really like the cartoons? Or did we just like being a kid? I wasn't going to let that stop me. I popped in some DVDs and pressed play. First up, Speed Racer. The first show that I watched was an episode of Speed Racer. While everyone talks about the limited frame rate, and yeah, it's occasionally very choppy, and the acting is melodramatic, the music is freaking great. The frantic dialogue was a product of audio editing technical limitations at the time, but it's impressive that they were able to make an English dub and air it just a couple days after each original episode aired in Japan. This show really feels like it was designed to work in both black and white and color, which was pretty forward-thinking for 1966, when color TVs were incredibly rare. What also struck me is how incredibly tight the storytelling was. We learn of a revenge plot involving a mysterious car, the X3, taking out racing company executives because of a fatal car crash years ago at a dangerous mountain pass. And, of course, the adult children of the dead racer just happen to be friends with Speed Racer. It's totally convenient, like those big universe stories where all the main characters just happen to know each other. All of this elaborate revenge plot would have not been needed if he had just gotten some therapy and talked to someone about his grief, instead of constructing a giant underground racing complex beneath his sister's flower shop. But if bad guys got the therapy that they needed, then there wouldn't be the need for any drama on Saturday morning cartoons. And then came the first commercial break, and the vintage commercials were fantastic. There was this 15-second PSA which started with a likely court-ordered appearance soap opera star. Does your friend have a drinking problem? And it was just so rapid fire. My theory that you have to pause for commercials totally enhances the experience of the cartoon shows. It was phenomenal, and so I'll include some cuts of vintage commercials from now on. So I've had this DVD of Speed Racer for a couple months now, and I haven't bothered to watch it, but knowing that it was part of this project really created a sense of anticipation. I never thought I would look forward to watching Speed Racer. So there might be something to this whole experiment. It's not any one particular element, but you put all the pieces together and it works.
Thinks the taste steals the show.
Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is a fascinating Saturday morning cartoon. It's based on the popular role-playing game that exploded into pop culture, but it also had a huge backlash that actually led to the cancellation of the show despite it actually being really good, with decent ratings and positive reviews. There were literally mom groups and televangelists preaching that it would lead kids to suicide and Satanism. Hogwash. I thought that the fantasy world of D&D was cool. There were a lot of positives from getting into Dungeons and Dragons. It was my introduction to storytelling, and I also learned a ton of organizing skills and math. For me, reading about D&D was more popular than actually playing it. My teachers complained that my D&D notebooks were almost bigger than my school notebooks. The D&D cartoon is great. It is a story about 1980s teenagers magically teleported into a fantasy realm and their quest to try and get home. They are helped by a wizard character, literally named Dungeon Master, and they're chased by the evil sorcerer Venger, who is also chased by the great dragon Tiamat. What a lot of people don't know is that this is one of those secret anime made by Toei Animation for an American media company. This isn't the only secret anime 1980s cartoon in this video. And I thought it was particularly cool to see the cartoon heroes from the cartoons make a background cameo in the recent Dungeons & Dragons movie. It helps build the whole interconnected world. Each episode is a nice, self-contained adventure, much like a single D&D session. I haven't seen the whole series, but it's cool to finally experience it all. Dungeons & Dragons continues to have pretty good storytelling and pretty decent animation. It's better than you remember.
No one puts the kibosh on the slosh.
Mighty Orbots. Mighty Orbots is a show that I remember watching a couple times as a kid and thinking it was really cool, and it blew me away that it didn't catch on. It is yet another secret anime written by an American studio but animated in Japan to take advantage of the favorable international monetary policy that made Japanese animation incredibly affordable at the time. The show's name, Mighty Orbots, would ultimately come back to bite them in the ass and ultimately doom the show. Mighty Orbots, plural, was the name of a team of robot heroes which would combine to form one giant robot called Mighty Orbot, singular. Toy company Tonka thought that the name Orbots was too similar to their brand of toys GoBots. Now, Mighty Orbots were 5 separate humanoid robots that combined into one giant super robot. The GoBots were individual robots which turned into vehicles. They weren't the same, but the threat of a lawsuit was enough to keep the show from catching on. The great irony is that the GoBots themselves were a derivative knockoff of the Transformers, which was becoming an international powerhouse and just crushed them. So the GoBots sued the Orbots out of existence, and then the Transformers took care of the GoBots. Now, watching it now, all the animation is really high quality, and it was way better than a typical Saturday morning cartoon. The early episodes in a show's run often have a higher animation budget to help get the series picked up, and it really shows here. It is a particularly cool looking show, and that's why I wanted to include it.
Star's brand cereal, a delicious part of this complete breakfast.
Later, I came back to watch Star Wars Droids. If you think about it, an animated cartoon show starring C-3PO and R2-D2 should have been a license to print money. Ironically, it was a huge financial failure. So it's a little vague about when it's set, but it mentions the Empire, so presumably it's a prequel during the years of Imperial rule. This show would feature some Star Wars concepts and setting that the later Star Wars prequel trilogies and animated series would adopt. In the episode that I watched, 3PO and R2 are upset about not having a human master, believing that they needed one to tell them what to do. They tried working in a 1950s style diner, which ends in a big mess. And then they go to sell themselves at what's basically a robot slave auction. They end up with Jan, a Luke Skywalker type kid, a racer with brown hair and a sweatband combo, who gets them on the bad side of a local space gangster. There's a bit of a plot hole where the villain needs help loading explosive minerals but not mining them. But hey, cartoon shows aren't known for their tight plots. Another potential plot hole where C-3PO states that he has no other master besides Captain Antilles in A New Hope could be explained by him getting his mind wiped a couple times as a droid. Speaking about getting your memory formatted, a lot of these shows were made to be aired once, and that was it. If you missed it, you missed it. It's interesting to go through it now and to see the lesser-known pieces of the Star Wars universe. It definitely has the seedy, lived-in, used world sci-fi trope that George Lucas popularized. The Disney-owned era of Star Wars deliberately went out of their way to call shows like this non-canon or legends. Much like the Star Wars Holiday Special, George Lucas signed off on this. Lucasfilm produced it and gave it their seal of approval. But I'm starting to see why this particular show failed to connect with audiences. The tone is inconsistent. And I really wanted to like Star Wars Droids, but it's barely passable. Sometimes those rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia just can't cover up the failings of writing that just doesn't quite land. For the last show of this block, I switched from coffee to root beer, and it really completed the kid experience. Now, this brings me to the keystone what-if show of the whole project, the original Mobile Suit Gundam from 1979. In Gundam, the giant robots are human-driven mecha called mobile suits, but is translated more accurately as automated warrior from Japanese. The show's sponsor, Clover Toys, wanted to sell bright, colorful robot toys, but the plot itself is surprisingly grounded. In Mobile Suit Gundam 79, humanity has moved much of the population to giant cylindrical space colonies. The so-called evil Principality of Zeon, with its World War I German aesthetic, is fighting for independence against the Earth Federation. The space combat is much closer to reality than typical space fantasy. They would worry about burning up in re-entry and oxygen getting sucked out into space. The magical MacGuffin is Minovsky particles, invisible particles that render long-range radar ineffective and explain why giant floating battleships and close-quarter giant robot combat is necessary. Partially because Clover, the sponsors of the anime, makes toys of these mobile suits and wants to get more airtime for them. In the previous episode of the show, the antagonist, Shar Aznable, double-crossed his ex-boyfriend Garma Zabi, an heir to Zeon's ruling family. By the way, Shar is Gundam's Darth Vader, but is way cooler. He has a mask and a cape and a red mobile suit, and a theme song, Gallant Shar, that is much better than the Imperial March. Gundam humanized the villains. They have their own motivations, backstory, and personality. It was brilliant. In the episode I watched, the fallout from the last one was immediate. The epic sequential storytelling that Game of Thrones became famous for, well, Gundam was doing that back in 1979. The animation is occasionally janky at times, but the ideas are incredible. Amuro, in the Gundam, takes out a giant enemy carrier plane, not with a laser blast from afar, but by jumping on top of it, whipping out a plasma mace and gutting the ship like a fish. Then comes the ending. The dead space prince's fiancée, who was just introduced 2 episodes ago, stands on the crashed carrier, aims a gun at our hero, and then slips and falls in slow motion, snapping her neck and dying instantly. That is pretty brutal for a cartoon made to sell toys, but not for Mobile Suit Gundam. Now, Mobile Suit Gundam did air in the US on Cartoon Network in 2001, but its run was cut short. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, TV executives got cold feet about airing a show that dealt with, so frankly, with the moral complexities and the horrors of war. What a world it would have been if we had seen this on TV in the 1980s. It would have been life-altering. Mobile Suit Gundam 0079 really was one of the coolest Saturday morning cartoons that never was. Even after my simulated Saturday mornings were over and I moved on to filming and editing this video, I still wanted to keep watching these cartoon shows in this particular block of programming. In his book, The Sabbath, religious philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel describes the Jewish ritual of keeping Shabbat as an island in time, a day that is a profound separation from the other days of the week. Watching Saturday morning cartoons might not be a religious ritual, but it's not without a parallel. I think that Saturday morning cartoons mean something to adults that grew up in Generation X or the first millennials, because they remember when it was a special weekly time. You know, I actually found this project to be very rewarding and fun. It was a little stupid to put rules on myself, but by thinking of it as a Saturday morning cartoon ritual, I was able to create the experience which definitely brought back a ton of memories and really felt different from the modern streaming era, which is also the modern cell phone era, where we are constantly bombarded by notifications and doom scrolling anxiety. I think that the interruptions, both from the commercial breaks and waiting until the next episode the next day, really helps you appreciate the story, since it forces you to think about it when you're not watching it. When you're binge watching shows on Crunchyroll or Netflix, you're not actually stopping to think about them. High-end restaurants serve their food on white plates because the colors of the food contrast against the void of the white plates. This helps bring your attention to spaces that are often missed in the era of constant streaming and constant noise. You know, you also have to commit to focusing on watching your cartoons. One of the things that I think that we miss is having an attention span. If you watch shows with your phone in your hand, then you are going to remember next to nothing. So this is an exercise in trying to build your attention span back up. Ironically, having a distraction in the form of a commercial break is easier to recover from than the constant pings from your social media feed. People used to complain that we sat in front of the boob tube as a kid, but at least we were giving it our undivided attention. My big takeaway from this is how you consume media. The state that you're in when you watch a show affects your overall experience. It is deliciously rebellious to enjoy the little things in life, to recognize a part of our modern world that is stealing away our focus and the enjoyment of things. So I encourage you to try this. Go find a DVD of a show that you remember being around but you didn't necessarily watch. You don't necessarily have to do this with a CRT TV, but it helps add to the flavor profile of the experience. Set aside a block of time and set your phone to Do Not Disturb. Pour yourself a bowl of sugar-sweetened cereal and watch some Saturday morning cartoons in your pajamas. Hey, thank you for watching this video. I had a lot of fun making it, and if you liked it, I definitely would appreciate it if you would give it a like on YouTube, and that definitely helps me out. So you should totally hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.